Howdy folks, Jamboree here, and for the next 4 episodes of Puppet Panic, I'm going to be reviewing all of the Chucky movies, starting with the Child's Play trilogy. Let's begin by discussing the first Child's Play film. One dark, stormy night, serial killer Charles Lee Ray is chased down by Detective Mike Norris. The detective catches up with the fugitive and shoots him down, but before he dies, Chucky tries to transfer his soul into a good guy doll. Cut to Karen Barkley, a single mother raising her son Andy. She's struggling to afford a good guy doll as a birthday gift for Andy, but she luckily manages to get hold of one from a street peddler. At first, this good guy doll seems perfectly fine and cute, but when Andy's babysitter is killed one night, no one knows who could have murdered her. Detective Mike Norris is put on the case. He first suspects Andy himself, so the little boy is put under supervision. But then it turns out that maybe Charles Lee Ray's spell worked, and he's managed to slide comfortably into Andy's good guy doll. Once exposed for what he really is, Chucky tracks down his old voodoo instructor, a priest called John Dr. Death Bishop. Chucky then demands to know why the spell didn't make him immortal. The priest explains that he is becoming more human the longer he stays in the doll, and Charles uses a voodoo doll to torture John into helping him. So the priest confesses that the only body he can transfer to has to be the person he first revealed himself to, and that would be Andy. The Chucky movies have gained a reputation for being a tongue-in-cheek franchise, but it's important to remember that the whole premise came from more serious roots, with the original creator setting out to make a legit, creepy horror film about an evil doll. When you look back on Child's Play, it's actually following the principles of horror really well, being surprisingly subdued and ambiguous about its concept. But I'd only apply this to the first half of the movie, as the film takes a different direction once Chucky exposes himself. Until then, the movie keeps us wondering, sending mixed signals about the good guy doll. Is there really a serial killer trapped in the toy, or is this Andy taking the grief of losing his dad out in violent ways? This kid may be cute and adorable, but let's not act like unsuspecting children have never turned out to be murderers before. Yes, we saw Charles trying to possess the doll, but we never see if he succeeded. Supernatural magic isn't a clarified possibility in this universe yet, so it's not out of the question to rule it out. The movie is consistently vague about who the actual killer is, relying on a child's perspective's angle, off-screen shots, and a blurred small figure running by, to make us divided whether it's Andy or Chucky running around. Of course, Andy is adamant that Chucky is the real killer, when he finds a blatant clue of the doll's shoe print in some flour, but adults immediately mock such a notion. Kids are renowned for making up stories about their toys, and no one can imagine a children's toy being designed to murder. Detective Mike Norris actually finds more merit in the possibility that Andy planted Chucky's footprints there. It's only when Andy starts quoting Chucky in a way that a child wouldn't naturally talk unless he heard an adult saying it, that we begin to start leaning more towards the killer doll theory.
He said Aunt Maggie was a real bitch and got what she deserved.
How can you say something so horrible?
This all plays into the film's satire on commercial products for kids. Is your child's toy actually ideal for them, or did you just want to buy whatever makes them happy? Andy's mother is so determined to prove her son innocent that she tries really hard to convince herself that Chucky is alive. No mum wants to accept the idea that the child is a murderer. Further inspection of the good guy doll makes her come to a spine-chilling conclusion when she notices that the included batteries haven't been inserted in yet. Suddenly, things become even clearer, but we need more proof. So Karen threatens to throw Chucky into the fireplace unless he talks, and then this happens.
You stupid bitch, you filthy slut! Did you fuck with me?
From this point on, the film goes from being a horror mystery and turns into a detective action thriller. Some say that the second half is the movie's downfall, and while I would have totally enjoyed a movie in which we didn't know who the killer was until the very end, I do think that there's some value to the second half of the film. One thing that I love about the second half is that while Chucky is 3/4 the height of his victims, the film finds creative ways to give him an advantage. Like the scene where Mike is attacked by Chucky while driving. This leaves Mike in a paradox, because letting completely go over the wheel could result in a car crash, but Chucky's knife keeps stabbing randomly through his seat, so he can't sit comfortably while driving. all making for a gripping action sequence in which the short-sized killer is able to overpower the detective. Yes, he could hop out of the car, but that could lead to an accident for someone else, something I'm sure a detective wouldn't want. Once we know that Andy isn't the killer, we begin to sympathize with him, as he's now a prime target for Chucky and no adults supervising him believe that the doll is alive. This taps into a common childhood fear, being afraid of something that grown-ups refuse to validate as a threat. It's something we all went through as kids. Andy's cherubic face and youthful purity juxtaposed against the sinister malice of an evil doll in a world where adults won't listen to him is the heart of a tragic childhood horror. And actor Andy Vincent brings a heartbreaking depth to that destroyed innocence and realistic fear.
But Chucky is here! Then he's going to kill me! Please don't leave me! Please!
We also feel for Karen, being the only adult to know that Chucky is alive, seeming irrational to everyone around her, while all she wants is to protect her son.
I'm sorry you couldn't find anything to help Andy. I really am.
But I did. I found out that Chucky is Charles Lee Ray. The only thing I don't know is how he got inside the doll.
Good night, Mrs. Barkley.
Where did Charles Lee Ray live?
Look, please, will you just get out of the car?
Hey, just tell me where he lived.
Luckily, Mike does become her ally once he's attacked by Chucky. I'm quite used to Chris Sarandon playing smug villains, so it was refreshing seeing him portray a hero. Well, kind of a hero. Sure, he's not the most polite or laid-back detective, but his heart is in doing the right thing, and following police protocol, he sort of borders on being an anti-hero in a way.
After I talked to you last night, I decided to go back to the station and pull Ray's file. I learned a couple of things. His nickname was Chucky, and he spent a lot of time with this man. Now all we have to do is find him before Chucky does.
Now, this isn't to say that I think that the second half is flawless, because in all honesty, this is where the film starts to make some less than smart creative decisions. When Chucky finds the voodoo priest who taught him how to possess bodies, Chucky gets hold of a voodoo doll representing John. How? Well,
Shouldn't tell your customers where you hide things like this, John. Gets you in trouble every time.
come on, that can't be the reason. What priest would be dumb enough to tell their customers, the people he's instructing voodoo to, where his own voodoo doll is? Mate, that's more than asking for trouble. That's being an idiot. This was a missed opportunity to have Chucky scrambling materials together to sew a voodoo doll of his potential victim while being chased around. The same voodoo priest later explains to Karen and the detective that the only way to defeat Chucky is by shooting him in the heart. Perfect, our heroes now know their enemy's weakness. Brilliant, a huge advantage, but what do? Everything but shoot Chucky in the heart, like they suddenly forgot what the priest just told them in the last scene, which leads to a dragged out finale in which Chucky never dies until someone finally remembers what to do.
The heart! Shoot him in the heart!
If our protagonist's main goal is to kill Chucky and they've been told how they can do it, they would not forget that kind of information easily. I get that the filmmakers want to reach the 90-minute mark, but there are less insulting ways to do that. Just make it difficult for Mike to shoot Chucky. He is a fast runner after all, and there's lots of things around the house that he could have hid behind. So yeah, as much as I'd like to defend the film's second half, I agree that it's not without its faults. Now, there's one thing I've not discussed so far in this review, a big part of this movie: Chucky. Well, I wanted to save that for last. Chucky spends the first half of the film sticking to his disguise, posing as a good guy doll to throw people off his trail, treating his soul transfer as the perfect decoy. And to his credit, he stays in character for an impressively long time. His choice of victims are always personal, never picking a kill for the sake of it, as much as he clearly enjoys murder. Margaret, Alex's babysitter, keeps stopping Chucky from seeing the news report on him, which could have helped him to keep up with his case. Detective Mike Norris was the one who killed him, thus forcing Chucky to transfer his soul to the doll. And a doctor is stopping Chucky from getting to Andy, so that he can transfer over to him. Chucky's murder methods aren't exactly creatively inventive or cleverly ironic. He kind of wings it most of the time, relying on a variety of weapons or biting with his teeth. But I guess that makes him more unpredictable than your usual serial killer. Not to mention his frequent attempts at strangling his victims calls back to his nickname of the Lakeshore Strangler, staying consistent to his backstory. So good on the filmmakers for remembering what they established. The question is, do I find him scary? Well, yes, when he's posing as a real-life doll, that gets under my skin. But once he starts talking, he loses his mystique and becomes less creepy to me. That's not to say that I dislike Chucky's character once he's given dialogue. On the contrary, I think he's a really, really fun villain. He takes creepy pleasure from his murders, like it's his sick, twisted hobby. He's also undeniably relentless about getting what he wants, stubborn even. He takes small things personally due to his temper. And he has so much confidence in who he is. No mercy, no shame, he's ready to kill and he loves it. Brad Dourif gives him this aggressive voice that makes him sound fierce and gritty. Ideal for making a possessed doll come across as intimidating.
Now how do I get out of this body?
No, I won't tell you.
Yeah? Tell me you died, John. Your choice.
Dourif really sinks his teeth into the role, getting a kick out of playing the voice of a killer toy. Like it's the part he was born to play. Heck, this is the character most people associate with him. Credit should also be given to child actor Eden Gross for providing Chucky's automated good guy doll voice, because it's the perfect distraction from his own more threatening sounding voice, which would have given him away maybe.
Say something, damn it!
Hi, I like to be hugged.
However, we all know that the best part of Chucky's voice is that laugh. What a cackle. As for Chucky's puppetry, the animatronic for Chucky, which was designed by Kevin Yeager, was certainly impressive at the time. A team of 9 puppeteers meant that they could give Chuckster a wide emotional range and flexible fingers. However, I could tell that the limbs had a certain restraint, looking very primitive and wooden. It may have been a technological leap for robotics at the time, but we still had a long way to go. While we can have some suspension of disbelief for this, as the doll would move like an animatronic, such an excuse wears off when the film starts making Chucky more human. I also love how the puppet deteriorates as the film goes along, showing how Chucky is becoming more and more mortal. This actually required having to use different heads for Chucky. That's how much effort was put in. To compensate for how the puppet couldn't walk on its own, 2 tricks were used. One was to use a small actor who would dress up as Chucky in oversized sets, which is pretty clever. Kudos to the Chucky double for imitating the wooden robotic movement of the animatronic. The other method relied on a dolly grip as the camera moved along smoothly to create the illusion that Chucky was walking forward. A very inventive way to work around limitations. Overall, I think that the team did a great job considering what they had to work with. I think that the first Child's Play movie is good. Not great, but good. It's an excellent mystery story with sympathetic characters, creepy moments, and some good action. I do enjoy it, but I will admit that it can get pretty dumb at points as well, though. Since the events of the last film, Karen Barkley has been sent to psychiatric help, and her son Andy is now in a foster centre. A couple called Joanna and Greg are introduced to Andy. Greg is hesitant, but Joanna is open-minded, and they eventually agree to adopt the boy. They welcome Andy to their home and introduce him to his foster sister Kyle, who has moved from home to home to home all her life. Meanwhile, the toy company behind the Good Guy dolls gained a poor reputation from the Barkley family incident, so they rebuild Andy's Good Guy doll to prove that it's not murderous, only for a machine to malfunction and bring Chucky back to life through electricity. Chucky locates Andy's new home, gets rid of Andy's new Good Guy doll Tommy, and takes Tommy's place. Andy soon realizes that Chucky is back, and the serial killer once again tries to transfer his soul over to Andy's body, but his adoptive family refuses to believe Andy's claims, assuming that he's just a troubled boy going through mental illness. So, first of all, I have to say that I don't like how this film sets itself up. A lot of it is very contrived. The idea that no one believed Andy and Karen about Chucky being alive doesn't add up when they had 2 police witnesses in the first movie. It's like the film wants to negate that fact, just to find a way to explain why Catherine Hicks wasn't recast, push Andy into a foster care situation, and carry on the idea of adults not believing, putting benefiting the new sequel's concept before established canon. You could have just said that Karen died in an accident, or maybe she committed suicide, or perhaps she really did develop PTSD from dealing with Chucky. Just some reason that doesn't act like there wasn't any witnesses to this supernatural phenomenon, because a big part of a sequel's responsibility is to faithfully carry on the first movie's story. Also, why would the toy company go out of their way to restore the old doll? If this was all for PR, why not use a regular doll as a stunt? The public and the stockholders won't know the difference. Yeah, it's dishonest and I don't support it, but realistically, it's quite common for corporations to use low tactics like that. The only reason they fix up the disposed good guy doll that Chucky possessed is to make it easier to resurrect Chucky as a villain. Alternatively, the factory could have run out of materials, so they started using junk from a garbage dump, and Chucky got mixed into the new good guy doll batch. Because honestly, seeing these businessmen going to such extreme lengths to restore the exact same original doll is just silly. Even once the film gets going, what we're pretty much given is more of the same thing we've seen before. Except this time, there's no mystery surrounding the good guy doll because it's made clear very early on that Chucky is back. And Chucky already knows that he has to soul transfer to Andy to save himself. So the film has very little to work with in terms of Chucky, because he's already got his mission, and the only adults who know that he's alive are out of the picture now, making his goal even simpler this time, too easy even. To get around this, Child's Play 2 keeps making weak excuses for Chucky to chicken out from his voodoo rituals, having him bail at the slightest possibility that he could be stopped, or he'll get distracted and waste time killing someone when he should know that he has bigger fish to fry. This is all to keep the movie going, because the moment that Chucky transfers his soul into Andy, that's it. The movie's over. The end. But there's only so many times you can hold off Chucky achieving this before it starts getting monotonous and drags the movie on. And yes, to be fair, that was a problem in the first film as well. But at least the first movie was more about Chucky's revenge killings, saving his goal to transfer bodies for towards the end, while this whole movie is about him trying to move his soul into Andy's body. There is something here in this sequel's premise, the idea of a child being haunted by the experience of being hunted down by a killer doll and how he overcomes his fear. That's something quite interesting for a horror sequel, because it centers more on psychological trauma and character growth. But the studio was so adamant to regurgitate the same idea all over again that we have to bring Chucky back with the exact same motive because creative risk scares Hollywood. With Chucky's return being forced into the story, Andy's foster parents are less of a symbol of love and hope, and more of an excuse to keep the whole "the adults don't believe Andy about Chucky" shtick going again.
Please, listen to me. I'm not lying. If you don't kill him, I'll come get me.
Andy, calm down. I'm going to get rid of him. There, see? He's gone. He can't bother you anymore.
Yes, this all plays into the same themes of childhood fear as the first film, and sure, Andy is even more vulnerable this time because he's having to convince a new family who are already nervous about raising him. But we've done this all before. You're beating a dead horse with a stick by recycling the same conflict here. It's boring to watch a sequel cover the same grounds as the original, especially when it lacks the mystery of the first film to keep us guessing whether Andy is telling the truth. I actually find it all rather mean-spirited and cruel, even for a horror movie. Andy has gone through so much pain and sadness already, yet the film is making things worse for him, putting him through the same experiences all over again in the name of rehashing the first movie's conflicts. Heck, I wouldn't even say that Andy comes off as scared in this sequel. He seems more exasperated and exhausted, tired of experiencing the same beats all over again.
He's still in the cellar, Kyle. Don't let him get you too.
Andy?
Sure, it's inspiring seeing Andy facing his demons, but a character doesn't need to experience the same horrors again in order to prove that he's grown stronger. Conquering psychological fears can be just as engaging to watch.
I'm sure you're gonna make all sorts of new friends.
Hey. Andy, rule number 2, no running in the house. It's only a doll.
However, there is a strong bond between Andy and Kyle. Kyle is aggressive towards Andy at first, due to a lack of family love in her life, plus she denies Andy's claims about Chucky, but she slowly starts feeling fond of the kid, becoming more like a sister to him as the film goes along.
You'll be okay.
Where'll I go?
Andy. I've lived with dozens of different families. And they always seem to send me away just when I'm getting comfortable.
These two are in the same boat, so obviously they're going to develop a sense of camaraderie, showing that foster siblings can have a healthy, loving relationship. In terms of horror, the film is a mixed bag, because for the most part, the attempts at frightening audiences are pretty cheap. It's the usual scare methods you'd expect from most mediocre horror films. A character explores a closed space, keeps mistaking things for a threat to set up a lazy jump scare, and then Chucky launches his attack. There are some creepy moments though, don't get me wrong, but the film always ruins their potential. Like a scene in which Kyle has worked out that Chucky is alive. She goes up to her foster mother's room, her back turned to the camera, with the sound of her sewing machine rattling away. Greg was killed in the previous scene, so has Joanna gone crazy from grief, or has Chucky got to her already? The fact that we're guessing is what makes it so scary. It's then revealed that she's been killed, and then Chucky rises up like a damn Halloween ghost, which is just silly and kills all the tension we just had. In the next scene, Chucky forces Kyle at knife point to collect Andy from the foster care center. It's a really tense moment, as Chucky has a huge advantage, being able to pull off his doll act while pressuring Kyle to sacrifice Andy to his predator. How do they screw this up? By following it up with the manager being killed and then accidentally photocopying herself, turning a gripping moment of horror into a sketch. The most memorable part of this film is the finale, in which the siblings face off against Chucky in a toy factory, which is once again very contrived. There's no reason for Chucky to take Andy to this location for the soul transfer, he could have done it anywhere. Plus, the layout of the factory is designed more for benefiting the conflict, with realism taking a back seat to turning the factory into a death trap for our characters. Why would the exit door be behind a dangerous machine? That's not exactly good for employee safety. Why are the doll shelves laid out like a maze? That seems unnecessary. How come the maintenance guy has to get so close to a machine's hazardous area in order to fix it? The answer to all of these? So it's easier to put a character in danger or force horror tension, regardless if it makes sense or not. Yes, I like the dark irony of killing Chucky in the very place his doll was built. That's clever. But in order to create that twist, the movie expected a demanding level of suspension of disbelief from the audience. One thing I will say about this film though is that it does have a step up in terms of puppetry. While Chucky's arms are still a little bit rigid, efforts have been made to raise the technical creativity, as Chucky can now actually walk. Yep, no more camera tricks or acting doubles, the robotics team found a way to have him make steps forward. The filmmakers seem way more confident about this Chucky puppet, letting him have more screen time than before, which I appreciate when editing this video. The movie wants us to admire this puppet. His face looks way more fluid, animated, and expressive. It's not a drastic improvement, but there's signs that the designers were trying to expand what they could do with Chucky. As the years go on, the puppetry can only get better because technology rapidly improves each year, which makes for a fascinating evolution process. So those are my thoughts on the second Child's Play film. Let's now finally move on to the last installment of the trilogy, Child's Play 3. Andy Barkley is now a teenager and has been sent to military school. He doesn't adapt well to the demanding expectations, is struggling to fit in, and has to deal with a bullying official called Shelton. Luckily, he makes friends with the nerdy Harold Aubrey Whitehurst and falls for the snarky Kristen De Silva. Meanwhile, Chucky's blood has ended up in a new good guy doll. He finds out that Andy is now at military school and sends himself to the school in a package. But a young boy called Tyler steals the box. Chucky is delighted that he has a new child to transfer his soul to and tries to charm the boy into letting him perform the voodoo ritual by tricking him into thinking that it's a game. Andy finds out that Chucky is back yet again and he must protect Tyler from Chucky. But Tyler refuses to believe that his new doll friend is a menace. In some ways, Child's Play 3 is better than 2, in other ways, it's worse. I mean, I can at least credit the film for shaking things up a little, like the setting of a military school, which is a big shift from a comfortable suburban home. It's a location that serves as an advantage and disadvantage for Chucky, because dolls aren't allowed in this school, and Andy or Tyler can't be seen holding him. So he can't simply hang around. There are times in which he's easily disposed of because the authorities see no need for kids to own toys here. But at the same time, this is a place where it's easier to access weapons, which means that Chucky has a wide range of tools in his arsenal, and he is experiencing teenhood too, which means that we get to see him go through his first romance, something he was too innocent for in the previous films. While it's not a deep love story or anything, it's nice to see this kid finally get a break and meet someone special.
Yep. Put the elbow, yeah, like that. And like this. No, keep both eyes open. Keep your sights on the target.
Plus, it helps that De Silva is a pretty likeable character. She's got a cheeky sense of humour, a lot of impressive confidence, is one of the only people willing to stand up to Shelton.
Are you contradicting me, you sorry-ass sack of shit?
You asshole.
What did you say?
I said you asshole, sir!
And has a genuine, sincere, affectionate interest in Andy, feeling sorry for what he's been through. Although, I don't like how she breaks into Andy's personal files. That's a breach of privacy. And I do find it rude that she takes Tyler's doll and paints it with lipstick without asking. That comes off as mean. Yeah, we find it funny because it pisses Chucky off, but to these characters, Chucky is just Tyler's toy.
What are you doing?
You'll see.
Wait, stop.
Here you go, little baby.
Come on. You're messing him up.
You're so cute.
Andy is no longer Chucky's chosen vessel for his soul transfer, so he's now having to play hero for another kid, a child that's naive to who Chucky really is. A big part of him is scared for Tyler, but he also knows that he was able to take on Chucky, so he thinks that maybe Tyler has a chance to defend himself too. This poor kid has no idea that his favourite new toy is murderous, but Andy is completely aware and wants to do all he can to protect little Tyler. Despite how awful his life has been, Andy has retained a good heart and a strong conscience. I really respect that about him. Even though the world's been cruel to him, he sees no reason to be cruel back. However, that's not to say that Andy has grown up happy. The dude has been messed up by Chucky's violent stalkings, as well as moved from home to home since his mother was sent to psychiatric care, which has made him into a quiet, unconfident and nervous young man. We get little moments that indicate a lost childhood and destroyed innocence, all because of Chucky's selfishness and the fact that the world constantly denied his claims.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. Almost forgot there were places like that. People just go to have fun.
For the first time, we also get a human antagonist in the form of the arrogant Shelton, who poses as a physically bigger and stronger threat compared to Chucky, often serving as an obstacle for Andy. He's someone so obnoxious that we end up hating him more than Chucky, an actual serial killer.
Who said you could look at me?
Do you know who I am?
The deaths in the film are noticeably more creatively ironic too, which I really appreciated. The CEO of the Good Guy Toy Company is killed by his very own products, a garbage truck driver is murdered by a trash compactor, and the military school barber is sliced with a shaving razor. I do love these kinds of horror movie killings because it shows a sense of inventiveness. Chucky gets some pretty funny moments too, from a scene in which he ends up killing someone by heart attack, something that both disappoints and surprises him.
You gotta be f***ing kidding me!
Plus, when he sees Andy smooching to Silver, he actually gets jealous.
Man, I really gotta get out of this body.
Unfortunately, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but at the same time, Child's Play 3 is once again more of the same thing. While the setting may have changed to somewhere else, and Chucky is targeting a different little boy now, it's still the same formula at the end of the day. Chucky constantly attempting to perform the voodoo ritual while pinning down a child, only to bail the second an adult walks in. Like he's forgotten that he's a serial killer. Chucky can't really fake his doll act here. It's not a place where toys fit at home, so there's not exactly a point to him pretending to be inanimate in front of people. He might as well kill anyone who interrupts his attempted rituals. But once again, it's obvious that the film is struggling to make Chucky's mission difficult without padding things out or getting distracted. I'm sorry, but this whole voodoo ritual nonsense that the series keeps using is definitely the franchise's biggest weakness, because it's a conflict that can't retain an entire movie narrative, without forcing silly contrivances to hold off the soul transfer. Sure, Chucky also has to go up against Andy, seeing him as a threat to his mission, but guess what? Chucky created that obstacle himself, by letting Andy know that he was back. He only has himself to blame for having an enemy this time. He could have just kept quiet and stuck to trying to transfer his soul over to Tyler. There's actually a scene where Chucky is caught killing the barber by Whitehurst, and he doesn't look fussed about it at all, even letting the kid run off. So why did he spend the whole film being worried about witnesses to his activities? You'd think that maybe Whitehurst witnessing Chucky's murder was for a purpose, seeing as it now makes him a possible ally for Andy. But nope, he decides to keep what he saw to himself, refuses to help Andy, and proves that everyone was right about him being a useless coward. Yes, he does eventually sacrifice himself by launching his body onto a live grenade, but it's too late at this point. He spends the whole film being spineless, never showing signs of development. So his noble gesture comes off as last minute and out of nowhere. Chucky even wastes time messing around with the school's paintball guns, filling them with live ammo, which certainly entertains him and pleases his homicidal needs, but is pretty stupid in the long run, because it just leads to his voodoo ritual being surrounded by the threat of real bullets, which could actually kill him or his soul vessel. Heck, he gets so distracted by having fun watching military students getting killed by his prank that he doesn't notice Tyler escaping. So what was the point of his stunt? Well, besides making for some melodramatic deaths and the shock value of teens getting unexpectedly shot, not much, because it wasn't a clever tactic on his end. Like Child's Play 2, the finale is set on a location that's chosen purely for cosmetic reasons more than narrative means. This time, it's a horror-themed roller coaster ride, making Chucky look like a dumbass for picking such a hectic and dangerous ritual area. I like how the ride poses as an obstacle for Andy, but an animatronic with a real metal scythe? Yeah, no, that's not exactly sensible theme park design. This isn't Itchy and Scratchy Land, you can't get away with things like that in reality, and it's obviously a forced excuse for slicing Chucky. That being said, the movie's climax does work well into Andy's character arc. You see, Andy has demonstrated a lack of confidence in using a gun, seeing as he's never handled one before, but with advice from the more skilled De Silva, he gains a better knowledge of targeting. The movie's finale tests his talents, while also pushing him into the same role as Detective Mike Norris in the first film, giving Andy a chance to finally be the one to kill Chucky this time, overcoming the fear that shaped him into a frightened teenager. So, what about the puppetry? Well, Child's Play 3 doesn't exactly amp the animatronics up this time, sticking to what the filmmakers already know what can be done with Chucky's puppet. Which isn't a bad thing, as that's better than letting the quality slip or fall back, but I can't really say that there's much risk-taking or clever new techniques. Although, it is kind of cool being able to see inside Chucky's head when his skin is slashed off. It's really gross to look at, but I also couldn't help observing the grotesque, intricate detail to the gore. Oh, and it's pretty cool that the puppeteers managed to convincingly show Chucky loading a gun, so I guess that's impressive in its own right. Before I wrap things up, it's time to address a dark cloud that hangs over this movie's reputation. You see, a tragedy that happened in my country of England is linked to this movie. In February 1993, 2-year-old James Bulger was kidnapped by 11-year-old boys Robert Thompson and John Venables. They took him to a train track, then tortured, abused, and eventually killed the toddler. Tabloid newspapers accused Child's Play 3 for motivating the murder of James Bulger, but further investigation proved that the boys had never even seen the movie. And as usual, it was just the media finding a scapegoat to sell papers. Child's Play 3 wasn't directed at children, it frames murder as an act of evil, Shelton is portrayed as a bully we must resent, Chucky is seen as a monster that must be stopped, and the killer doll pays for his crimes by the end. So, those were my thoughts on the third Child's Play film. I've been Jamboree and I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, then feel free to like, subscribe and share. Also, please consider supporting me by making a monthly pledge to my Patreon in return for awesome rewards. Thank you. In the next episode of Puppet Panic, we're carrying on Season of Chucky as I talk about Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky. Cheerio, folks.